think what they're doing is great. They're standing up for people's rights.
Facts are this. They do not represent all the union members.
It's them against us.
Melbourne's streets have become a battleground of COVID ideologies. The catalyst for the protests, which started yesterday, was a decision by the state government to mandate COVID vaccinations for construction workers.
The construction industry must take this opportunity to reset and to restart the industry. We cannot simply go back to the way things were being conducted. Broad-scale non-compliance across the industry that was constituting a threat to public health in the most dramatic of terms.
In response to the protest, the government stood down thousands of construction workers across Melbourne and parts of regional Victoria overnight, unable to work for 2 weeks. The divisive decision is the latest attempt to curb growing COVID case numbers in the industry.
We put the industry on notice, you'll recall, a week ago that we needed to see a substantial improvement. Since then, we've seen poor compliance and further transmission sites being identified, and that just cannot continue.
Compliance has been a very small issue. Most sites are pretty compliant.
Health authorities said half of the construction sites it inspected failed to meet COVID safety requirements. Out of 6,000 active COVID cases across Victoria, 337 are linked to building sites. While the CFMEU encourages its members to get vaccinated, it doesn't want to see jabs become mandatory.
I've said all along, our union, our building industry group of unions has said all along, we do not support mandatory vaccinations. We support people's choice.
Union Secretary John Setka claims the violence isn't coming from his members and blames so-called professional protesters.
There was a small contingent of our members there, but the vast majority of them were like people I don't know, like from neo-Nazis to all these extreme, just professional protesters.
But there's now a public debate about the extent these protests are driven by union members or anti-lockdown activists.
Anyone who looks at the footage can see there's not a Nazi symbol anywhere in that crowd.
I've seen on right-wing groups, they're moving this. I'm a tradie, I'm fully vaccinated. To me, they just come across as just uneducated and just scared. They're idiots, sorry.
It'd be silly to try to paint all protesters as far right. There are obviously people out there in the community who are upset about this, who may be attempting to express their views through protest, whether or not that's right or wrong, particularly in lockdown.
Wow. Police cars were attacked in the city. Then in the afternoon, protesters surprised police by leaving the city and storming one of Melbourne's busiest roads, blocking traffic for hours on the Westgate Freeway.
I would say there would be a very small percentage of union members out there today. There are 300,000 construction workers just in Victoria. That is such a small percentage of that industry. Union people don't have brand new, shiny high-vis. They have well-worn uniforms, and mostly on those material, what you'll see is union logos. You saw very little of that today. This is about an anti-vaccination protest, and the demands were of anti-vaxxers as well. They weren't union-type demands.
Those who study far-right groups believe they're using anti-lockdown and restriction sentiment to boost their numbers.
The far-right are attempting to mobilise, they're attempting to recruit, and they're attempting to grow. There's been an historical animosity directed towards trade unions by the far right throughout history. And so by showing up at a CFMEU protest and attempting to claim that they're representing the workers, this is an attempt to mobilise amongst a group of people they might otherwise not be able to reach.
Researcher Joshua Roos says the longer lockdowns go on, the more these groups are likely to grow.
COVID, if anything, has acted to break down, I suppose, bonds of trust with government and authority. We've been now in lockdown, almost the world's longest lockdown here in Melbourne. And so over time, people lose trust, people lose their jobs, there's a stronger sense of anxiety and alienation in the wider population. What that offers for the far right is pretty much the perfect precondition for them approaching with a different narrative, saying, well, government's not working for you.
Their goal would be to sort of have some influence in ending lockdowns. But I think these far-right groups are not simply concerned with COVID. They have a wider agenda going on. You have misogynist, white supremacist ideas that are at the core of this. It has traditional ideas of, society. It wants to sort of restore, in some senses, white pride.
I've been blown away at the amount of support that we've had for vaccinations. We've only really had pushback from one or two contractors regarding this. Majority of them have already been fully vaccinated or at least one dose.
Mark Little owns a small construction company in Geelong. He isn't a member of the CFMEU, but due to the industry shutdown, they now can't go to work.
I'd think that we'd be delayed by at least 3 to 4 weeks. And it'd have to cost our small business at least $30,000 to $35,000.
Rebecca Casson is the CEO of Master Builders Victoria. It supports the vaccine mandate and says small businesses like Mark's are the victims of these protests.
We absolutely condemn the actions of those rioters. They do not represent our industry, and nor do they speak for our workforce. And everyone needs to be clear that for them to come back onto a building and construction site, they must have had the first vaccination or be able to provide proof that they've booked that first vaccination.
Victoria, we've been doing this now for 78 weeks. We're trying to find some sort of hope and hang on to that hope because, everyone's past breaking point.
Protesters stayed in the city well into the evening, with concerns there could be more unrest in the days ahead.
Our primary focus is the safety of the public. It has been all day, and we'll continue to try and stop this protest. We will stop this protest, and we will then step back and investigate and hold those to account who need to be held to account.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.